There is a particular kind of silence that doesn't just hurt you, it rearranges you. It happens after the warmth, after the late-night honesty, after the feeling that something real was finally beginning to breathe between you. Then suddenly, the air changes. Their replies get shorter. Their energy pulls back. The tenderness becomes harder to reach, like trying to touch someone through glass. And you sit there, staring at your phone, replaying every word, every pause, every shift in tone, trying to understand how someone can make you feel chosen one week and emotionally exiled the next. And what breaks you is not always the distance. It's the confusion. Because nothing clearly ended. Nothing was named. No door was slammed. No truth was spoken out loud. Just a subtle withdrawal. A coolness. A strange, almost invisible test that begins long before you realize you are being measured inside it. That is the part nobody warns you about. A dismissive avoidant often does not test you with obvious games. They test you with absence, with emotional inconsistency, with the space between what they feel and what they can tolerate feeling. And if you do not understand that, you will misread the entire connection. You will think you are fighting for love, when in reality, you are being pulled into their fear. Because the brutal truth is this: the more you chase clarity from someone who is terrified of emotional engulfment, the more unsafe you become in their nervous system. Not because you are too much, not because your feelings are wrong, but because intimacy, for them, does not always register as comfort. Sometimes it registers as pressure, as loss of control, as threat. So while you are moving closer to secure the bond, they are backing away to regulate themselves. And if you do not see that clearly, you will take their coping strategy and turn it into a verdict about your worth. That is where the damage begins. A dismissive avoidant can care about you deeply and still pull away from you with surgical precision. They can miss you and ignore you. They can think about you all day and still leave your message unanswered. They can feel tenderness and panic in the same breath. This is why people get trapped in the loop. Because what they sense underneath the distance is not indifference. It is something more haunting. It feels like feeling without access, love without permission, need without language. And that is exactly why it becomes addictive. Your brain is not responding only to the person. It is responding to the pattern, to unpredictability, to emotional contrast. One moment gives you dopamine, the next gives you deprivation. One warm interaction lights up hope, and the silence that follows floods the body with cortisol. The amygdala begins scanning for danger. The nervous system becomes hypervigilant. You stop resting in the connection and start monitoring it. Everything becomes symbolic. The delay, the tone, the missing emoji, the shift in cadence. You are no longer relating. You are surviving. This is how a bond becomes chemically consuming, and dismissive avoidants often do not even realize they are creating this effect. Their testing is rarely conscious in the dramatic way people imagine. It is often instinctive, protective, built from a deeper belief they may never say out loud. If I let someone matter too much, I will lose myself inside them. So they test. They test what happens when they go cold. They test what happens when they become hard to read. They test whether your emotions will flood the room. They test whether closeness will cost them freedom. They test whether your love can tolerate distance without becoming a demand. And most people fail that test, not because they are weak, but because they are wounded too. Because when someone pulls away, your own pain starts speaking. Your abandonment wound starts grabbing the microphone. Suddenly, you are not just reacting to them. You are reacting to every moment in your life when love became unstable, conditional, confusing, hard to keep. So you reach, you explain, you over-clarify. You ask where you stand. You try to soothe the disconnection with more presence, more softness, more effort. But to the dismissive avoidant nervous system, this can feel like the walls closing in. And now, the tragedy deepens. Because the more dysregulated you become, the more they convince themselves that closeness is chaos, that dependence is dangerous, that needing someone means being trapped inside their emotional weather. So they detach further, not because they stopped caring, but because they became overwhelmed by the intensity of what caring started to activate inside them. That distinction matters. It matters because if you keep reading their withdrawal as proof that you are not enough, you will keep performing for someone who is not asking for performance. They are asking, without knowing how to ask, for emotional spaciousness, for relief from intensity, for a connection that does not feel like consumption. And this is where the real test begins. Not whether you can hold on to them, whether you can hold on to yourself. Because the core concept underneath so much dismissive avoidant behavior is not rejection, it is non-reactivity. That is what they are scanning for. Can you stay rooted when they become unclear? Can you feel your feelings without turning them into pursuit? Can you experience distance without collapsing into self-abandonment? Can you want them without orbiting them? Can you remain emotionally available without becoming emotionally frantic? This is the part most people do not understand. A dismissive avoidant often trusts what does not chase them. Not because they love being ignored, but because calmness reads as safety. Stability reads as strength, and emotional self-possession does something to them they do not know how to admit. It disarms them. Imagine the scene. They take longer to reply than usual. Hours pass, then a day, maybe more. In the past, this is where most people begin unraveling. Double texts, indirect stories, sudden emotional paragraphs, attempts to force certainty out of ambiguity. But this time, nothing dramatic happens. No panic leaks out of you. No demand, no performance. Just presence. Quiet, steady presence. And now, something changes inside them. Because they were bracing for impact. They expected your anxiety. They expected to feel responsible for your emotional escalation. They expected closeness to turn into pressure. But instead, they meet a silence that is not punishment, a distance that is not manipulation, a person who is not collapsing. That unsettles them in a different way. Now they have to feel their own absence. Now they have to sit with what they created. Now there is space for missing you to rise without being drowned out by the relief of escape. And that is when the power dynamic begins to flip. Not because you played a game, because you stopped feeding the old one. Dismissive avoidants are often deeply defended against overt need, but strangely vulnerable to emotional restraint. When you stop trying to force access, they lose the structure that allowed them to stay comfortably detached. Your chasing gave them distance. Your over-explaining gave them the upper hand of emotional control. Your urgency helped them avoid their own longing. But your calm makes them hear themselves again. That is when they start checking your energy, wondering if you are pulling away, rereading old conversations, feeling the weight of your absence in places they used to suppress. They may not call it anxiety. They may not even consciously label it as missing you. but it shows up. In curiosity, in restlessness, in that strange impulse to circle back after they were so sure they needed space. Because now, the emotional field is no longer organized around your pursuit. It is organized around their uncertainty. And uncertainty is hard for someone who survives through control. Picture what happens inside them on those quiet nights when no one is demanding anything from them. No conflict, no pressure, no emotional intensity to push against. Just stillness. And in that stillness, your absence starts becoming louder than your presence ever was. They remember your softness, your steadiness, the way you looked at them without trying to own them, the safety you offered before fear distorted it. And suddenly, the detachment that once felt protective starts tasting like loss. This is the part people romanticize too quickly. They think, finally, now they will chase, now they will realize, now they will come back transformed. Maybe, but maybe not in the way you imagine. Because when a dismissive avoidant begins to feel the ache of disconnection, they do not always move directly toward intimacy. Sometimes they move sideways. A small message, a casual check-in, a meme, a strangely timed reaction, an almost confession disguised as something light. They reappear carefully, testing whether access to you still exists without requiring vulnerability from them. And if you are still starving, you will mistake breadcrumbs for devotion. That is another test. Not theirs this time, yours. Can you recognize the difference between renewed contact and real emotional availability? Can you feel the pull without immediately surrendering your center? Because if the old pattern resumes, if their return instantly rewards them with full access while nothing has changed beneath the surface, the cycle will repeat with even greater force. Closeness, panic, distance. Your confusion, their shutdown. Your pursuit, their relief. Then the emptiness. Again, again, again. This is why breaking the pattern requires more than silence. It requires identity. You cannot use non-reactivity as a tactic while secretly bleeding for a result. They will feel that. Your nervous system will feel that. And the old dynamic will still own you. Real non-reactivity is not coldness. It is self-respect with a pulse. It says, I can care deeply without abandoning myself. I can understand your fear without auditioning for your love. I can leave room for your humanity without making your unavailability my home. That energy is different. It does not beg. It does not punish. It does not perform detachment while secretly keeping the door cracked with trembling hands. It simply returns to truth. And the truth is, someone testing you through withdrawal is revealing the limits of their current capacity, not the limits of your value. Read that again in your body. Their inconsistency is not a mirror telling you what you are worth. It is a nervous system telling on itself. Yes, they may care. Yes, they may be overwhelmed. Yes, their distancing may be more about fear than indifference. But none of that changes what the pattern does to you if you keep trying to earn safety from someone who can only offer sparks. Understanding them is not the same as surrendering to them. Compassion is beautiful. Self-abandonment is not. There is a dangerous fantasy many people carry when dealing with dismissive avoidance. The fantasy that if they just become calm enough, patient enough, mysterious enough, healed enough, they will finally unlock the love hidden behind the wall. But love is not something you should have to trick out of someone's defenses. If connection only deepens when you disappear, if they only feel you when you stop needing them, if your full heart is only tolerable when it is half withheld, then you have to ask a harder question. Is this love growing, or am I just becoming easier to keep at a distance? That question can save your life, because the goal is not to become so undemanding that someone wounded can love you without discomfort. The goal is to become so anchored that you no longer confuse emotional scarcity with emotional depth. Some people are intense because they are profound. Some connections feel powerful because they are unfinished. Know the difference. A dismissive avoidant may indeed start chasing when you stop chasing them. They may feel your silence. They may miss you with a force that surprises even them. They may start wondering who else now receives the warmth they took for granted. They may obsess in the private places they never show. But that does not automatically mean they are ready to love differently. Sometimes they miss access. Sometimes they miss regulation. Sometimes they miss the version of you who made intimacy available without requiring reciprocity. And if you do not become conscious here, you will hand your power back the moment they return. So when they reappear, do not just ask, "Do they want me?" Ask, "What version of me are they returning to? The one who overfunctions? The one who self-erases? The one who carries all the emotional labor? The one who accepts confusion as chemistry? Or the one who can finally say, 'I see your pattern. I do not hate you for it, but I will not live inside it anymore'?" That is the shift. That is where your energy becomes unshakable. Because the deepest transformation in this entire journey is not getting the dismissive avoidant to stop testing you. It is becoming someone who no longer fails herself when the test appears. Someone who does not panic at ambiguity. Someone who does not interpret distance as a summons to prove love. Someone who knows that being deeply felt by another person means nothing if you are not deeply honored there. Someone who stops romanticizing, almost. Someone who stops starving in front of closed doors and calling it loyalty. Your power returns in layers. First, when you stop chasing what confuses you. Then, when you stop translating mixed signals into hope. Then, when you stop seeing self-control as suppression and start seeing it as devotion to your own nervous system. Then, finally, when their silence no longer feels like a courtroom where your worth is being decided. Because it never was. You were never on trial. You were just standing in someone else's unresolved fear and calling it fate. And maybe that is the hardest truth of all. Not that they pulled away, but that you kept moving toward the place where you kept disappearing. No more. Let them feel the space they create. Let them meet the echo of their own defenses. Let them confront what distance costs when your energy is no longer available for emotional extraction. And you, come back to yourself. Come back to the body that has been bracing. Come back to the mind that has been overworking for crumbs. Come back to the heart that was never too much, only too willing to bleed where it was not being held. You do not need to become colder. You do not need to become harder. You do not need to become unreadable to be respected. You need to become unavailable for confusion. That is different. That is sacred. When you do, something profound happens. The very energy that once made you chase begins making you choose. The part of you that once begged for reassurance starts becoming the source of it. The hunger quiets. The obsession loosens. The nervous system learns that love is not supposed to feel like a disappearing act you must survive. And suddenly, whether they come back or not is no longer the center of the story. You are. Your peace is. Your standards are. Your capacity to stay open without staying trapped is. That is what real power looks like. Not making them miss you, not making them run after what they could not value, but becoming so rooted in your own worth that anyone who wants access to you must arrive with clarity, consistency, and the willingness to stay. Anything less can knock on the door. It just cannot live inside you anymore.